Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. Hello there and welcome to a new episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. Glad that you found the time to join us on this episode of the podcast. 68,733. That's the number of phones that is being produced every hour. Can you let that sink in? 68,733. That's the number of phones produced every hour. And as if that is not enough, 13 million phones are being thrown away every day. 13 million phones are being thrown away every day. Multiply that by 365 days, you have about 5 billion phones being thrown away across the world. That's unbelievable. And you ask yourself, where do all of these phones go? Think about the components, batteries, think about laptops, think about the cables, wires, extensions, panels. All of this is what contributes to what we know as electronic waste, e-waste for short. And studies shows that out of all the e-waste that is being generated, 80% of them actually have the ability to be refurbished or to be reused in other ways or to have some recovery process. But 13 million phones thrown away every day. That is staggering, to say the least. Very painful to let this sink in, if you ask me. And this is why it's important for us to have conversations around e-waste and what it means for the environment. Thank you for joining us once again. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and it's a pleasure to host this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. The conversation today centers on strategies for responsible digital waste disposal. Greenbytes Wednesday is a podcast where we facilitate critical conversations and stir up reflective consciousness in you, the listener, or you who is watching. And for us, we hope that these conversations can afford you to understand the impact of our digital footprints, can also help us to understand Nigeria's technology ecosystem, and most of all, to know what trends, what tools, what sort of approach we should keep in mind when we talk about digital sustainability. And Greenbytes Wednesday is part of the Scale for Net Zero program. The Scale for Net Zero program is centered around smart climate awareness, learning, and empowerment program. Many thanks to the UK government for making it possible for us to record this episode series. And this is where I turn to my guest, Dr.Sylvanus Barnabas. We'll be talking around strategies to address digital waste disposal. He is a senior lecturer at Nile University, where he teaches around environmental law and other themes around international human rights law. And he's published a number of papers, very vast in the field, and it's such a pleasure to welcome him to the podcast today. Welcome, Dr. Barnabas.
Thank you.
I sort of gave a little bit of background, but if you had to introduce it, e-waste, what is e-waste?
Well, I'll say, as the name implies, e-waste is waste that is generated from our use of electronic devices or digital devices, as you may want to call it, or more generally, waste that is generating from our consumption of information, communication, and technology devices or services.
Great, thank you. And why is it important for us to have conversations around e-waste today?
Well, it is very significant because at the beginning of the program, you dished out quite a humongous amount of statistics in terms of the amount of phones, for example, that are being produced, and the amount, the quantity of phones that have been disposed of as waste. But you just stopped at phones. How about computers? How about televisions? How about other electronic and digital devices? So if in the context of phone alone, you have such a huge amount of statistics, a huge amount of waste being generated, think about it. When you include the statistics that have to do with other electronics, you then see that we're dealing with a huge amount of waste.
And statistics put it at 50 million tons of waste that is being disposed of every year.
There you go. And you're dealing with waste that in some instances include hazardous substances that are very harmful to the society. So we're dealing here with a situation that affects humanity and affects us in the context of Nigeria, given our population. Do not forget, Nigeria has the highest population in Africa. To make matters worse, we have a growing population. What that means, we have a high amount or percentage of young people who are growing, who are going to multiply. So in years to come, our population is going to increase. And human beings, as you know, and this is not peculiar to Nigeria, are thermodynamic.
What does that mean?
Yes, that means that human beings or societies, the percentage of consumption of energy in any society is proportional to the amount of people in that society. Because humans have been consumers of energy since time immemorial. And when it comes to our use of electronic devices or digital devices, we're talking about consumption of energy, because most of these electronic devices rely on consumption of power in order for us to be able to use them. So on the one hand, while we are generating waste in the manner in which we're using our digital and electronic devices incrementally, we are at the same time putting pressure on our sources of energy. And if, for example, majority of Nigerians are heavily reliant on the consumption of fossil fuel in order to power their devices, that means that we are having an increasing impact on the environment. Because if we are using fossil fuel, then we are talking about an increasing amount of emission of greenhouse gases, which is a major cause of climate change. So that is why it is such a significant issue, the issue of e-waste generation.
Great. And you talked about, or you sort of opened the door into that e-waste environment nexus. But I want us to put it in sort of delve into it a little bit. You talked about some harmful waste. I know, for example, we have lead, we have mercury, and this thing seeps into the waterways, speculate into the soil. But if you had to give more context to it, what's the connection? To what extent do these e-waste impact the environment, and how does this then in turn affect the people that live within that environment?
Okay, take for example, we had an incident years ago called cocoa in cocoa, where it was a transboundary issue where some hazardous materials were deposited somewhere in cocoa in Delta State.
Okay.
That over time had a very negative impact on the health of members of that community. In the context of electronic waste, when electronic waste is handled irresponsibly or unsustainably, it has a direct impact first on the environment and on the people who live in the vicinity of the environment where this sort of waste are disposed of. That's number one. Two, it also has negative health impacts on the individual. So it's also not strictly an environmental issue, but also a public health issue. If some of these electronic devices contain some of these hazardous substances that you're talking about, like lead, like mercury, these are substances that have been proven scientifically to be harmful to humans, then you see a direct correlation between the manner in which we handle or treat this digital waste with the way we live our day-to-day lives. So they are intrinsically connected to each other. And I made the point earlier about the fact that the higher the amount of electronics that we use, electronic devices that we use, digital devices that we use, the higher the amount of electronic and digital waste that is being generated, but also the higher the amount of consumption of energy. That is putting pressure on our energy sources. So we are not conserving energy because we are incrementally using digital devices that in most cases are configured in a manner that makes them consume a high amount of energy, but also environmentally and health-wise. In the process, we're fueling our generators. Most organizations use generators, use diesel to power their generators, use petrol, fossil fuel generally, to power their generating plants. That is polluting the environment. That is emitting carbon. That is emitting greenhouse gases. So there is a boomerang effect on each and every one of us. So that is for want of a better word, the sort of symbiotic relationship, negative symbiotic relationship between electronic waste, electronic devices, electronic waste, and humans.
Great. And I also know that on other episodes of the podcast, we sort of delve into the other parts of the cloud system and storage. And like you said, the more access people have to electronic device, the more data they collect and generate, and the more pressure this also has on storage system, more demands on water, more energy demands. But from here, let's move into the thanks for setting the foundation, telling us what e-waste is and making that connection very clear between the environment sector and e-waste, and of course the human part of component of this. But let's get into the main crux of today's conversation: strategies for responsible digital waste disposal. As we know it today, both e-waste and other forms of waste, we rely on, a huge part of the informal sector rely on these people we call babambolas, the waste pickers, who go about picking without gloves, without any forms of protections for their health. And this is definitely not sustainable. This is not healthy. This is not responsible. So can you lead us into what does it look like? What does a responsible digital waste disposal look like?
Well, taking it from where you left it, you talked about the informal sector. These people called babambolas, these people you wake up in the morning, you see them carrying bags, sacks, and picking up whatever electronic device they find on the ground, whether it is a waste or it is something that is still useful that somebody throws away and all that. Starting from there, responsible digital or electronic waste management in that context implies integrating this informal waste management sector as epitomized by these so-called babambolas, integrating them into the formal waste management sector. By doing so, we are recognizing these actors, these stakeholders, in the informal, digital or electronic waste management sector as key players, as key stakeholders in the digital and electronic waste management sector. Having done that, then it takes us to another level. Educating them, conscientizing them, making those in the informal waste management sector, where there's a lot of irresponsibility anyway, in the manner in which digital and electronic waste is being managed, making them conscious about more responsible waste, more sustainable waste of managing these electronic and digital waste, training them, skilling them, thereby gradually dragging them out of the informal sector into the formal sector. This is also another way of increasing the human capacity, the human capital that will be available to us in the formal sector in terms of managing electronic waste and digital waste in a responsible manner. So that's one strategy.
Or maybe two, because I hear you say from sort of formalizing the informal sector, educating
them.
Yes, okay.
Yes, that's skilling them.
Yes.
In the informal sector, yes, that's two. And also, there is something known as EPR. EPR stands for Extended Producer Responsibility. This connotes tackling the problem of digital and electronic waste from the source, the producers, the manufacturers. So one strategy of enhancing this is by enacting laws and policies that takes the responsibility out from the consumer and from the local governments back to the manufacturers and the producers, making them responsible for the negative environmental impact of their product from the point of production to the point when it appears as if they are becoming waste and about to be disposed of. That way, producers will know that they have a responsibility upon them to make available products and in certain situations services that are eco-friendly, products that may not necessarily end up as waste, products that are repairable, products that are reusable, products that are recyclable, products that are refurbishable. So that in a way reduces the amount of electronic waste that ends up in the society, because manufacturers are producing products that have a lesser degree of ending up as waste, thereby impacting the environment negatively. The other way, another strategy, I think this is about the third or the fourth strategy, is about improving the way we collect or improving or making available the infrastructure and facilities for responsible collection, sorting and recycling of the waste. So this responsibility is on government. So government needs to find a way of establishing accessible e-waste collection facilities, centers, infrastructure, e-waste recycling facilities and collection centers. In this way, the government can make it convenient for people to responsibly dispose of their e-waste or their digital waste. They can also achieve this by establishing certified recycling centers. So I have a product that is recyclable. How do I find a center that is certified as a center that can recycle electronic waste responsibly? The other way is also to encourage manufacturers, that's the government and the general members of the public, to encourage manufacturers to produce electronic devices or digital devices that have a longer lifespan. So products that are durable, that do not get easily spoiled, that last long. I'll give you an example. The computer that I use, I've been using it for the past 15 years. I did my Masters of Laws program on it. I did my PhD program on it. I'm still teaching on it. Yes, people look at my computer and they say it's antiquated, but guess what? It gives me everything that I need. That is my own way of reducing the amount of electronic or digital waste out there. And that then leads me to the other strategy. Responsible consumption. The consumers of electronic and digital devices, we need to devise a way of doing our research before we buy products. Which companies have a reputation for making available products that have a long lifespan? Which companies or what products are out there in the market that when I buy them and they are bad, I can repair them? The other angle to it is that as individuals, as consumers, or as individuals or as companies, we need to develop the ethos of not always buying. I buy an iPhone this today, next year there's another iPhone this, oh, I throw away this one and buy another one. Also, you must not necessarily buy an electronic device. If I can borrow it from my neighbor, if I can borrow it from my brother, if I can borrow it from my father, if I can borrow it from my friend, why do I have to come back? We have to also learn how to devise a culture of renting. If I cannot borrow, why don't I rent? Pay for a day and give it back. That way, the amount of electronic and digital devices in the system are reduced. And in the same vein, we are also reducing the amount of digital waste or digital or electronic waste that is available in the society. There is also, still on strategy, the issue of education and awareness. Making people aware, members of the public aware about the negative impact of irresponsibly managing electronic waste and digital waste. There's also, and this is on the part of government, but to some extent on the part of the private sector, investing in green products, investments, making funds available for manufacturers and individuals who want to go into the business of producing electronic or digital devices that consume less energy, or producing devices that are quite easily recyclable, either in making them come back as the same product or coming back as something else. So, in a nutshell, this is just some of the strategies that can be adopted in enhancing a responsible and sustainable digital waste management in the society.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Barnabas. Those are very insightful strategies. Thanks for listing it out. One that I pick up is that part of companies, of the producer, being responsible beyond the lifetime or beyond when the item leaves the shelf or leaves their production company, being responsible, knowing that they are responsible even long after. And you also said something that companies should be more deliberate about producing items that will last for a longer period. I think a few years ago, a friend told me that the light bulb as we have it, that the first light bulb that was created hundreds and hundreds of years ago still works till date. And that it was, I think in 1925, when a particular group of company took the patent or sort of bought the patent for light bulb, and they said, you know what, we don't want light bulbs to last forever because we'll be out of business. And so first it was 2,500 hours for a light bulb, and later they reduced it to 1,000 hours. And I wonder how long the light bulb in your house lasts. Does it even do 500 hours before it becomes destroyed? And this tells you that there has to be deliberate responsibility that companies need to take. And in places that they are not taking it, it builds you and I to call them out, to ask questions. And this can only happen where we have the knowledge. And that's why we have conversations like this, to say that we can make this knowledgeable for you. Do you also think, coming back to you, Dr. Barnabas, do you think that corporate social responsibility on part of organizations could be one strategy also?
A very significant strategy at that. I'll give you an example. In the United Kingdom, companies are required to make periodic corporate social responsibility reporting to regulators periodically. And part of this requirement is that companies are expected to demonstrate, backed by evidence, how they have been enhancing environmental sustainability. And companies that fail are penalized and sanctioned. Companies that demonstrate a very high record of corporate social responsibility in this context, that is environmental sustainability, are given certain regulatory advantages. For example, tax rebates and things like that. There are other benefits that are informal. For example, when consumers know that this company is responsible environmentally wise in terms of how it manages its in this context, digital devices, for example, or electronic devices, customers tend to patronize them the more. One strategy of doing that in Nigeria is that the regulatory bodies in Nigeria, for example, say the Corporate Affairs Commission and various other regulatory agencies, need to introduce a regime where companies in this country, in this context, in the ICT sector, are required periodically, say annually, at the end of the year, companies should, in their audit report, dedicate a section to demonstrate how they have been managing digital and electronic waste responsibly. You see that this way, companies will be compelled, to comply and ensure that they are using more eco-friendly digital and electronic devices, and that where the need arises, when they have to manage, where there is a waste, electronic waste or digital waste, that they manage it responsibly. So yes, corporate social responsibility is one very, very significant way of managing digital waste in any society.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much. And I hope that to you can check with your company and see how responsible you are when it comes to reporting or actually doing very meaningful corporate social responsibility. As we take this conversation home, as we bring it to a close, and we look to the future, when I started, I mentioned 68,733 phones produced every hour. I wonder how many, I wonder where the market is and how many of them really goes to waste even without being used at all. And with 13 million phones being disposed every day, 5 billion if you calculate at on a yearly basis. And it's saddening that 80% of these still have the capacity to be used again and again. And if you wonder where the statistics are from, it's from the Global E-Waste Monitor, the Global E-Waste Monitor. And some of this reflected in a movie that was recently released. It's called Buy Now. You can take some time to look at it if you want. But let's look at the future. Dr. Barnabas, you said that humans are thermodynamic. That was the word you used.
Yes.
And by implication, you said we will always want more. If as of 2024-25, this is the figure, what then happens in a world where we have more access to wealth, where we have more access to production capacity? Can we really get ourselves as a people to adopt some of these strategies and become more responsible in how we manage our digital waste?
Yes, we can. And I say there are several ways, there are a number of ways in which we can do that. One of which is everybody as individuals, but also as collectives, whether as family, as community, as local governments, as states, as the Federal Republic of Nigeria, we can choose to imbibe certain things. One of which is choosing quality over quantity. So if at any point, as individuals or as collective, we are at the point where we are making the decision to obtain or to purchase an electronic or digital device. We need to conduct a proper research in the market as to what is the quality of this product, what is the environmental impact of this product, what is the longevity, the lifespan of this product, how environmentally friendly are the materials with which this product has been produced. And if I use this device or I purchase this device, how will this decision have either a negative or a positive effect environmentally? So, we need to imbibe the ethos of regular maintenance.
How do you mean? Also,
Yes, you don't have to wait until your device, whether a smartphone or a computer or a tablet or your television or whatever electronic device starts to malfunction before you think about maintenance.
yeah, and sometimes decluttering, just taking out things you don't need.
So this means cleaning the pots. You don't need a lot of skills to do that. Make sure the pots are regularly clean. This means using protective devices in the context of smart screens. Have a screen guard. Always clean your screen. So these minor things, using quality chargers and things like that. These are minor things that can extend the lifespan of your electronic device, and by implication, reducing the amount of digital or electronic waste that ends up in the system. Also, another thing or attitude we need to imbibe is to adopt the attitude of repairing rather than replacing. I have a phone that is malfunctioning. Quickly, simply because I have the money. Say there is an increasing amount of money in the pocket, even though I don't know the impact of inflation on that. But simply because you have the money to purchase another electronic device doesn't mean you have to do that. Think about your digital footprints. Can I repair it? Can the malam whose shop is there, can he repair it? Can I just take it to him and get it repaired and I keep using it again the way I have been using it? Then we can also, instead of, you just mention something like that, instead of just throwing it away as a waste, you can just go and change it, give it back to a particular company, and they just simply give you another product, maybe the same product or a higher product or a more functional product, and then they use your old product and probably refurbish it and bring it back in the market.
Hopefully they do.
Yes. Another thing we can be imbibe is the issue of overusing. We have to avoid overusing our digital or electronic devices or overloading them with issues. See, some people, their smartphone, for example, is their television, is their library, is their phone, is their computer. You're just simply overloading your phone, thereby reducing its lifespan. You're also killing your battery. Don't forget batteries, smartphone batteries, or batteries for computers, or batteries for tablets. When they are disposed, they are also electronic waste. So the higher the pressure you put on your device, the higher your quantum of contribution to the amount of digital or electronic waste in the society.
Right.
And then, what is wrong with sharing? What is wrong with me sharing my laptop or my tablet with you? What is wrong? What is wrong with sharing my projector, which you want to go do a presentation somewhere? Do you have to buy yours? What is wrong with that? What is wrong with borrowing?
Yeah.
So in these little ways, we can greatly reduce our digital footprints on the sands of time.
Great. So much to take from this conversation. One thing that I think I will take is quality over quantity. There is actually a whole lot. He also talked about finding e-waste recycling infrastructure, and in places where it's not available. I know not so many are available in Nigeria, maybe a few, but this is also a challenge to private sectors and to government, state level, federal level, to begin to see how we can have more of this in place. We also reflected on decluttering and sort of being conscious with how we engage with these digital devices. And if you don't know where to start from, just share this episode with someone in your network and have conversations with people about e-waste, the threats, the impact on our environment, and how we can all collectively co-create better usage or better engagement with our digital tools or digital equipment that we have. And that's the episode of, or that's the package on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something and that you will share with your network. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. Also, we'll be happy to know your impressions, what you feel about the episodes. If there are things you think we can do better, feel free to reach out to us through any of our channels, and we'll be happy to take that. Remember, you can find this episode on every podcast streaming platform, and that includes SoundCloud, that includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, of course, and everywhere you find your podcast. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. I want to say a big thank you to the team, to Ayo, Ajibola, wonderful, who has made this episode a reality. Finally, I want to say thanks to the UK government for making support available for us to bring you these conversations. And most of all, thank you so much to my guest, Dr. Sylvanus Barnabas. And that will be all for now. Till the next episode, check out other episodes and continue to make the world a better place. Every bit counts. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye for now.